our September webinar. We do have a special guest speaker today from two speakers from Jawnt. So before we get into their presentation, just a few things to go over. If you have any questions, please feel free to use the chat. We will go through your questions towards the end. We are recording this webinar as well, and we will send it out to you. So if you do have any follow-up questions or need further information, please feel free to let us know when we send that email out. You could just respond to us. And we will get started. We're just going to do a quick review of Delaware Commute Solutions, and then we will go right into our guest speaker. So next slide, please. So Delaware Commute Solutions is a free commuter program through DART, which is a public transportation for Delaware. What we do is we work with employers, employees, higher education institutes, and community organizations to assist with transportation options. And we do this by encouraging all modes of clean commuting to get to work or to school. This program is available to anybody who lives, works, or goes to school in Delaware. It is a free service that is state and federally funded. The mission of Delaware Commute Solutions is to improve the air quality of Delaware. Therefore, by encouraging clean commuting, we are helping to decrease traffic congestion, which will also help to improve the air quality. Next slide, please. Oh, actually, we're gonna stop sharing our slides. We're gonna let Kapish and Ruth share their slides. So I just want to take a minute to welcome Kapish and Ruth from Jawnt, who will be presenting on how Jawnt can assist you and your employees on commuting to the office. So I'm going to turn it over to both of you. Thank you so much for joining us today to provide us with this information.
Thank you, Amy. Yep, my name is Kapish. I'm joined by Ruth. We'll get an intros in a sec, but excited to talk to you all this morning. Being that it's morning, we wanted to keep it light yet informational. So hope that you all can come away learning something about really ways that we can get employees back into office, what employees are thinking about when they hear about returning to office. So please feel free to drop all your questions in the chat and we'll make sure we have time to address all of those. So I guess for intros, I think today we wanted to bring a little bit of two backgrounds here, one on the employee benefits and employee experience side, and then one on the transportation side. I handle Jawnt, which is a commuter benefits platform. I handle our US expansion and growth team. Pretty much my day is spent talking to the HR side of the house. How are we able to put together proper commuter benefit programs to be able to get employees that want to utilize them and to really make that a sticking point on why an employee likes being at the company. Typically, my background's focused on anything future of work related. And as we think about coming out of the pandemic and what the future of work looks like, more than ever, we believe that commuter benefits and getting employees to work in a sustainable manner and with cost savings in mind is something that's going to be table stakes. So looking forward to bringing that side of the house, and I'll turn it over to Ruth, who has the transportation background.
Thanks, Kapish. We do make a good team. Hi, everyone. My name is Ruth Miller. I'm Jawnt's Director of Product Partnerships, and I have spent a long time thinking about how to get people on the bus. Most recently, I was the head of product for the MBTA here in Boston, where I live. And prior to that, I helped build the transit feature for Apple Maps, transit features for Lyft. I've spent a long time thinking about the information people need to feel comfortable to leave their car at home or to get on a bus and have it take them in some new direction. And how to pay for it is surprisingly a large part of that question. So I'm happy to be here and part of this team today. And I'll take the agenda and keep going. So we're Jawnt. We're a transit benefits provider based out of Philadelphia, so not too far away from Delaware. And we have partnered with SEPTA and PATCO and Amtrak and several agencies in several other cities across the country. But we are hometown Philly, Delaware, and we are very excited to speak with you all today. So in our work about getting employers and organizations thinking about how to ride, one set of questions we've heard a lot, we had trouble answering, to be totally honest. How many employers provide benefits? What's normal? We found a lot of employers that were struggling to find a baseline. They want to do more than average, but if you don't know what average is, it's kind of hard to tell that story, to get excited about it, to justify it. So we found some answers. We hired a panel over the summer to survey 400 HR professionals across the country and produced our State of Commuter Benefits report. And I know a QR code on a screen is weird, so we're very happy to send this out to anyone after the fact, but we can talk through some of the findings from this. Kapish?
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So, yep.
Go for it. I think today, one of the things like going off the commuter benefits reports that we saw was when it comes to return to office, it's very common that there's employee pushback. And when we think about it, then it's obvious that employees want to spend more time with their family and be in their home with their loved ones. But I think there's another side of the house that we have not really focused on, and those are some of the costs related to just coming into the office themselves. So when we talk about what's causing employee hesitancy, there's a wide range of things beyond just what you would think of as wanting to spend more time at home. So if we take a look at just the commuting costs themselves over the last 4 or 5 years, we've seen a lot of changes since we went into this work from home model because of the pandemic. So what we saw, one is just car prices, right? So if you want if you want to buy a new car, the cost of that has raised by 30%. And if you think to yourself, okay, I'll go the used car route, it's actually increased by 40%, so even more increase there. And then when someone gets a car, oftentimes having to get a car solely to commute to work, they then see the cost increase of gas prices, then also mainly health insurance premiums, which has had a huge increase recently. So there's the actual employees needing to buy a mode of transportation if if they believe that car is the way to get to work. But then while they're in the car driving to work, we realized that just even an average market, not taking like your San Francisco's and New York Cities of the world, just an average market, the amount of time an employee spends sitting in traffic getting to and from work takes up about $6,000 or productivity hours. So just yet another reason of getting employees onto a different mode of transportation getting to work. I know when I take the train, I see a lot of people checking emails and getting their work started early. That is not possible when going by car. So just thinking about the car commutes, it's both a benefit for the employer to get employees away from a car commute, and as well as on the employee side for cost savings and productivity, just trying to try different modes such as public transit. Because what we have seen is while car prices increase, the cost of transit has stayed relatively the same. And I think this is an important piece. We talked about actually the modes of getting people to work and the cost of cars and everything that goes along with it going up. There's oftentimes just a lot of overlook costs that employees are hesitant about when it comes to returning to office. So if someone started working remote and had no idea what the future looked like when coming back to work, chances are they never really budgeted for that commute and the costs that come with going into an office before maybe signing up for a rent or a mortgage, maybe in a different budget area that they had, or bringing on a couple of other expenses, thinking that they don't know what their costs are. They don't know when they have to go back to the office. They never calculated that. So some of the main things that we hear about or employees when it comes to additional costs are obviously things like childcare. That's pretty big. And all those people that got pets over the pandemic, they all of a sudden have to find dog walkers or pet sitters, which takes up a lot of money, and it's unexpected when it's a return to office mandate. And then next, obviously, we have clothes and makeup, just like looking presentable coming to work, and we have lunch money. So when we take a look at all of these things, my background includes being at a benefits provider for childcare as well as transit now. Those childcare and transit costs are really the only two things that are tax advantage benefits for an employer to be able to offer. There's some incentive on the tax saving side for them to do that. And then more so when we think about childcare and transit, we know that transit, when getting people back into the office, that is something everyone has to do. So we look at transit benefits as the most cost-effective benefit for an employer to provide when thinking about ways that they can mitigate the employee stresses that come with all these overlook costs when it comes to commuting back to work.
And costs are great in some ways because they're quantifiable. This was the biggest thing we heard as a cause of concern in the State of Commuter Benefits report, and you see why. It's you have numbers you have to make. We all have budgets we have to live within, and when you think about transit, the environment might come up second or third, maybe, and it certainly did in this report, but it came up really strongly for Gen Z. So younger commuters, younger professionals care certainly about cost, but this scored very highly with that group as well. And maybe this isn't news to everyone, hopefully, but transit is better for the environment than driving. And we found some great examples after this report and leading up to it of ways that employers were able to quantify the environmental impact. And we've certainly seen carbon offset reports, and there's a whole wealth of research and data and models and examples out there to be able to say, for example, we have a workforce with 2,500 people based on where they live and the hours they're working and all these other constraints. You can come up and say, well, thanks to this calculator published often by Rutgers, actually, that our workforce is saving or is producing 3,400 metric tons of carbon. And that's not a large company. And being able to divert some of those people driving to transit, that's something the employer can quantify and take credit for. And that's also a way to help justify the effort into finding things like transit benefits. And also lack of employee interest showed up on the survey. And that's something that we like to think is less about interest and more about awareness. You can't be interested in what you don't know and understand. And there are, again, plenty of solutions to be able to quantifiably address things like that. So I'm segueing nicely into reports and plans. And phase 2 is how to build a commuter benefits program that's going to work for you and your employees. So some tips that we've seen across the country and some good feedback that we've gotten. Basically, always start with understanding your employee needs. A lot of people put out surveys. There are great ways to use data. You already know probably the zip code of where people live because they have to file taxes and do a W-2 and all that. So there are ways to get pretty low effort benchmarks about the costs people are experiencing, both in terms of money and time and carbon. And then as you're getting this information and looking at opportunities, setting a goal. It's hard to have a plan without a specific goal. Is it to reduce parking? We see a lot of hospitals that are trying to free up parking for patients. Is it about environmental goals? Is it saving money? Is it return to office? It's hard to have a good plan without a good goal. And then I mentioned already surveys to understand preferences and concerns. Are people hesitant to give up their cars because they're concerned about childcare? Is there a way to augment that? Are they concerned about emergencies? Guaranteed Ride Home is a great program and one that's available. Are there other considerations that can be designed in to respond to those concerns? And then I already mentioned zip codes. Transit competitiveness analysis is a fun product that Jawnt will offer to anyone on this call that's interested. But basically, we use that. We've done this for dozens of employers at this point. And we use that home zip code. We don't want to get too personal. We don't want to know exactly where people live, obviously, but just a count of employees per zip code and office location. And we're able to compare the time savings of transit to say, to basically benchmark what a reasonable enrollment rate would be for a company. So Kapish and I were talking with the university on the East Coast on top of a metro station that had, I think they had 1,500 students and maybe fewer than 150 were enrolled in their transit pass. And we were able to say, look, actually, you've got a ton of people that we're categorizing as A, who for them, transit is actually faster than driving. So maybe they can't participate in what they don't understand. There's an awareness issue there. And the folks who are in B, where transit's a little bit slower, but not that much. And if you consider the time to find parking, things like that, maybe it starts to break even. That's maybe more of a messaging about the value of transit itself. And we can all just sort of set aside the folks that are DNF and maybe deprioritize those for the marketing. And the B's and C's are also fun to talk about with carpool and vanpool, folks who maybe live along a trunk route. Maybe there are a lot of people coming from that direction. Once you know how many people live in a home, have the same home zip code, you can start looking for other creative solutions to address there. All right, so number 2, building around the most relevant transit modes. If you've got a lot of people that, for example, are along an Amtrak corridor, how do we make sure that we're offering a pass that works for them? Is there a subsidy that could work? How do we get plans in front of people that address their actual lived experience and that actually makes sense for them? And then again, remembering that everyone, there are valid reasons people have to be cautious and concerned, but good information that's tailored specifically for their experience and their commute needs can go a long way. And then, of course, building a direct relationship with the people who are participating in this. You're affecting the way they start and end their day in a lot of ways, and making sure you're helping to build systems that are reliable, they're sustainable. No one wants to get a bunch of emails about a bunch of changes. You want to be able to set it and forget it. So being able to work directly with transit providers. Jawnt has a great relationship with Amtrak. When they are planning to change the cost of a monthly pass, we're able to communicate it long in advance so people know before their payroll is deducted what the changes might be and when they should expect that. Being able to sync your benefit provider with your HR. If you're a lot of very small companies do live in spreadsheets, and obviously that's valid and important. We don't want to make things more complicated than they need to be. But if a company already has an HRS system and payroll, how to make that as smooth an integration with as few hiccups as possible. And then being able to set a subsidy policy, hand it over, and be done with it. We've heard some pretty terrible stories about just too many variables all in people's heads and having to go back and forth through to make sure that works. But again, being able to set a policy that makes sense, document it, hand it over, and let it run.
Yeah, and really, I think one of the things that we hear a lot about too is a lot of times the people in charge of companies who have to administrate these commuter benefits, they sometimes view it as a double-edged sword where they understand all the benefits of the program, but if they're spending 10 hours a month administrating this program for maybe a 10% enrollment rate, they think that the higher that enrollment rate gets, the more time that they have to spend on admin work. So again, I think there's the education to the employees on the benefits of commuter benefits, but then also we want to start thinking as an admin, what are things that we can do on our end to make our benefits offering scalable so we don't have to have that feeling of I raised my commuter benefit enrollment 40% over the last year, and without having to stress about all the additional work that may come with that.
And then also being able to communicate the program. I didn't plan for this to become such a recurring theme, but we can't participate in what we don't understand. So meeting people where they're at. Digital campaigns. I think we all in this call are good at email because we were able to join this webinar. And there are certainly digital connections that people already have, but printed materials can just catch people in that moment where they're not expecting it and maybe make sense sometimes. We did a fun thing at Jawnt with a client in Philly where they had a whole bunch of different offices, and we made custom maps for all their break rooms that showed their actual office location and where the bus routes were nearby and where they went, and just kind of less trip planning. Once you get someone on Google Maps or Apple Maps, they're set, but more trip awareness to catch the folks that might see a bus go by but not really take the time to have looked it up before, and just kind of being aware of people's patterns and where to catch them with the information they need at the right place at the right time. And then also being able to see if your commuter benefit offers any sort of trip awareness or trip planning. Carpool and vanpool are especially really useful or benefit a lot from this sort of individual based experience. And then just being consistent. It's one thing to have a new vendor and you're very excited and you push it out, but new hires come in, people move, the weather changes. May, for example, is a really great time to start talking about transit and bike benefits. We haven't even talked about bike benefits, but it's nice out and people's lives and routines and schedules change. Maybe over the summer, they're not dropping kids off at school, so things might be a little different. But being consistent and continuing to use these channels to reach people, to catch them at that moment where, maybe now I'm ready to consider leaving my car at home. Maybe something's changed.
Yeah, and really, I think tying together step one, which we talked about data and the transit competitiveness awareness score, tying that to the communication seems really important for us as we bring data to customers saying, hey, 50% of your population lives in a world where transit is quicker. We can work to create programs around that, but then what we realize is maybe sometimes it's not as easy as, like, let's say there's a group of employees that they're in the suburb right outside a city and it's a 30-minute car ride, 40-minute transit ride. You would think, maybe if we just give that specific population some stipends to take transit, we can convert them. And then initially we thought that's a really cool model, but then we get into the world of making benefits equitable. And one of our clients told us that's actually a very high income suburb. So what is it going to look like for us to provide more of a stipend amount to the people that are higher earners at our employer, at our company? So want to keep those in mind. And there's different ways. Like, think about communicating with the data that you have. Another example for us in a university town we're working with, they realized a huge group, 1,000 employees out of 10,000 within a mile of campus. So while that exists, a lot of them are buying parking permits. So what are some things that we can design and communicate programs around for them? It's, why don't we try to eliminate them from even being able to purchase a parking permit, in return give them a $50 a month walking benefit or a bike benefit. So really trying to guide and create the subsidy programs through one, proper communication, but doing it in a way that incentivizes a more sustainable commute altogether. So I think when Ruth kind of just went through all the different ways that an employer, what an employer has to think about when putting together a program with employee hesitancies in mind. Now let's kind of take a look at what this looks like when it comes together. So we'll take a couple of examples from clients that Jawnt works with. So some of the main challenges of these two different clients kind of ending up with the same solution is, we work with this large workforce that was very car heavy employer commutes. But when they think about it, they said, this is an organization where there's employees and patients coming together in a hospital system. What happens when they say, like, the number of parking spaces that my employees are taking up is really diminishing my patient experience side of the house, where we want a world where if someone needs to come into our facilities, they need to have the highest priority parking. That is, we need that saved for them, but it's getting taken up by employees coming in. Combining that with the fact that a lot of their office staff used to be in a remote work from home environment, and now there's some pushback there. All that's happening while that thing we talked about, commuter benefits sometimes being seen as a double-edged sword, saying, like, they're thinking, I already take up a lot of time administrating this, but my enrollment rate is pretty low. So I don't want that to get even higher if I make the effort to increase enrollment. So when these organizations came to us, we figured out what are some ways that we can mitigate these issues in a seamless manner that's not creating admin overload. So going back to properly designing subsidies, in the past, we talked about, like, making sure that we create subsidies that are equitable, and make sure that no one feels like they're getting the short end of the stick. A different way to view this is, beyond just employee demographics, we can always incentivize and create programs that's geared towards sustainable transit. So what these two organizations did, they ended up saying, let's over-index ourselves on the amount that we give for transit subsidies. So you see here, it's a 50% match for up to $105 a month. It's one organization did for transit, while doing a 0% subsidy for parking. And so this is one way that they were able to get those people that are dealing with 30-minute car trips versus 40-minute train trips to skew them over to at least trying transit. And what we find is, when someone takes sustainable transit to work, especially when they're a new hire and that's their chance of really creating some different mode shift for themselves, if we can get them on that first time, we have a much higher chance of keeping them there and really leaving the car at home for good. And then this other org, they had an even higher need to get parking spaces reserved for patients. They said 0% subsidy on parking, and we're going to go up to 80% on transit to match. That in itself also creates the same result of employees seeing money talks, and they're saying, okay, it is much more cost effective for me to take the train, regardless of how much time it takes or a difference. So putting these programs together, what we saw was, one, I think the big thing is talking about pre-pandemic ridership versus post-pandemic, the struggle to get back to those numbers. With the subsidies on the transit being so high, these organizations were able to surpass pre-COVID ridership within 1 quarter, while doubling enrollment. So what we've realized is, surprisingly, when there are subsidies and perks involved, stipends involved, employees talk, and it really creates this word of mouth feel where if there's 2 or 3 people in a department that actually has a chance to domino department-wide to get more people enrolled. So we see almost double the enrollment post rollout. And then going back to supporting these employees, there's oftentimes commuter benefits has been tied into the other pre-tax accounts that we're aware of, like HSAs, FSAs. But when we think about those two accounts compared to commuter, people commute to work almost daily, and it's consumed differently and far more frequently, which means there's a higher chance that something goes wrong. Like what happens if a payroll deduction happens, but someone's SEPTA pass didn't get loaded? That's putting that person in a really bad spot because the deduction happened, but then they're left paying post-tax for a different pass altogether. So we want to make sure that the employee experience is at the forefront of all of this. So one of the things that actually led to doubling enrollment rates was just a really high employee satisfaction, rating a 91 out of 100 NPS score when we survey these people, making them feel confident and not making the commuter benefits seem like it's the clunky old platform that no employee wants to use. And I think the really cool outcome out of all of this was we started with public transit and sustainable transit as the main cause, like let's get people away from their cars. But as trust with employees increased over time, and then admins got that trust of, I can really put fuel to the fire on this program without having to overburden myself, they were able to then expand to post-tax benefits. So we know van pool, parking, transit, those are all pre-tax benefits. But at this moment in time, things like bike shares, electric scooters, things that maybe that last mile or the people that live a mile away from office could use instead of wanting to walk to work, that is post-tax. But then because of all of these trusts that are gained with the program, they were able to roll out a bike benefit and a scooter benefit. So really allowing different modes of transportation, whatever is the best suited for a specific employee. So really, really encouraging to see those results. And that pretty much concludes what we have to talk to you about. Wanted to save some time for questions or any discussions. Happy to have it. I know we have about, maybe let's say 3 to 5 minutes here. So happy to answer anything.
Thank you so much, both Ruth and Kapish. Great information. I especially liked, because everybody thinks about the actual commuting cost. So how much, for parking, or how much is it going to cost in gas? But what I took away was those other costs that people may not think of. So the child care, the elder care, if I have a dog and they're used to getting a midday walk, who's going to do that? I got to pay for that now. So those are those are some things I don't think people think about until they actually have to start paying for them. So I think that's great to look at those. I know we did have comments. Let's see. Erica mentioned that she utilized SEPTA and DART. At one time, SEPTA, which has the trail pass, was accepted for payment for DART travel, which I remember it was. Now I have to purchase both a SEPTA pass and a DART pass. So unfortunately, that did happen. I believe that was 2 years ago. Kathleen might know the exact time frame, but DART does not accept the SEPTA trail pass. I don't know if you had any experience with SEPTA and especially coming into Delaware with DART, since they are two different states and not accepting the same passes.
It is unfortunate that all the roads go to the same places. The road network is very easy, but transit is very federated. And
right.
This is a good example. There's also a lot of Amtrak routes that share track with SEPTA Regional Rail. And we've seen people that were paying separately for like an Amtrak 10 ride and a SEPTA pass. And then they would just show up on the platform and take whatever train came next, because you don't want to wait an hour if there's one coming right now. And that's why, I know we're running out of time, but Jawnt also, we support a Visa-backed debit card for pre-tax that you can tap to pay on any system that supports that, or you can use it to pay for your DART pass or your SEPTA. But it's less administrative hassle for the employer, because you're just giving people their pre-tax funds and they can spend them on any tax eligible costs that they want. And if they have one of those, unfortunately, a little bit more complicated commutes touching on multiple agencies, they get to handle that. It passes that on to the employee, and the employer just has one thing to worry about.
That could be a good answer to those questions. And then also Erica mentioned that she's enrolled in the Delaware Commute Solutions program, but she finds the perks are mostly for Delaware companies. And is it possible to provide more for Philly-based partners? So with Delaware Commute Solutions, because we have state and federal funding, where we work is strictly within Delaware. So we ourselves cannot go out of state Delaware to work with a PA employer or a New Jersey employer. Though if you are commuting, so I'll use myself as an example, I do live in Pennsylvania. I do commute into Delaware. So the Delaware Commute Solutions program for individuals, you could still register for the program. You're commuting in or out of the state, as long as you live or work in Delaware. You can still use our benefits, which are the customized commute planning. We're showing you your options, whether it's transit, van pool options, carpooling, safe biking and walking options. And then we have the guaranteed ride home trip reimbursement program, as well as our rewards program. And I will say, even though it is a Delaware based program, since we are under DART, we do, for the rewards, for instance, we do have rewards that are in other states. So I know there are rewards by me in Pennsylvania. And if you go through the rewards, you will see other rewards that are located in New Jersey, in Maryland. So even though we can't work with an out-of-state employer, if you live out of state, you'll still be able to benefit from those individual benefits, not necessarily the employer benefits that we offer to the Delaware employer. So I hope that clarifies that question for you, Erica. Do we have any other questions for Ruth or Kapish?
Amy, this is Kathleen.
Yes.
I just wanted to add one other thing regarding the benefits that Erica was referring to. So, like you were saying, that the benefits then, maybe the rewards is if it's what Erica's referring to, that they are based on, it could be where you're living, and you can, if you're living in the Philadelphia area, then it will be based on that zip code, and it'll pull those rewards from that area if she's thinking of that. But I just wanted to make sure. I know you were touching on that with the benefits, but just so she does know, it does pull from where they are located and the address that they have in their system.
But as a reminder, we have recorded the webinar because I know we had some people who last minute couldn't join us. So we will be sending this information out. If you want to follow up with Ruth or Kapish, I know they would be happy to assist in providing more information. As well, if you have any questions for Delaware Commute Solutions, myself, Kathleen, Kiara, we are happy to meet with you in person or virtually to provide you more information, whether it's on an individual level or on an employee or workforce organization level. So you will have all our information as well in that email. So feel free to reach out to us with any questions or just follow-up information that is needed. I know we're a little bit over 10:30, so I just want to thank you all. Ruth and Kapish, thank you so much. This is great information, and I think it allows us to look outside the box of just your typical commute and really explore what our other options are.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, and everybody have a wonderful day.
All right,
you.
thank you.
Bye-bye.